a 15-year-old guy in India, and I recently encountered something that honestly still bothers me from time to time. For starters, this was on the 3rd of January, and I had decided to take a long walk outside. While there aren't many wild animals in the area, there have been instances where escaped zoo animals and even wolves have been seen. For those of you who don't know, sloth bears are probably the most aggressive bear species out of all the 8 species of bear that exist in the wild. Even if they're about 1/4 the size of a fairly large Kodiak bear and are about 6 feet tall or more on their hind legs, you do not want to mess with one. Their massive canines and their claws, as well as their personality that seems to be that of a wolverine on creatine mixed with that of a power tool, they're more than capable of turning you into a pulp. They're feared even more than Bengal tigers here in India, which should tell you something. They've been observed driving away even the most motivated of tigers or leopards. Here I was just looking at this huge, over 300-pound bear just minding its own business, trying to get some grub and some termites. Then I noticed that the bear wasn't alone. There was someone behind it. It was a man, and he was holding a gun. I don't know if he was an official from a zoo or a hunter. So here the man is, pointing the gun towards the bear's direction. And just when it seems like he's about to pull the trigger, a twig snaps. In the blink of an eye, the bear turned its head and went berserk and charged the man at an insanely quick pace. The man shot in the bear's direction, but it did nothing to stop the bear, because, get this, sloth bears are very resistant to gunshots and can charge humans if they're wounded. So anyway, back to the story. The bear knocked the man down so hard that he went flying back about 7.5 feet, and the bear just started to absolutely maul the living hell out of this man. The fear-inducing roars of the enraged bear, coupled with the horrifying sounds of the man's screams as his bones and muscles were audibly being torn into. I cannot even describe how gut-wrenching it truly was. It's one thing to see a sloth bear attack on YouTube, but to see it happen up close, even from a distance, it's unexplainably disturbing. Shockingly, by some luck, the guy had accidentally pulled the trigger and he fired a shot into the air. This was apparently enough to startle the bear and make it run away into the opposite direction. I was just standing there in pure shock and horror and was only able to snap out of my trance when the man very weakly groaned, "Help me." His injuries were beyond horrific. His limbs were bloodily mutilated and his face was covered in bright red blood. I helped him up and I took him to a nearby hospital. He's doing fine now, but at the cost of one of his eyes, several broken bones, multiple stitches, and a nearly torn off leg. And no, the bear didn't get put down. Rather, the bear was tranquilized and released into an area far away from any human activity. I know this story probably isn't very scary compared to other stories on this subreddit, but you have to put yourself in my shoes to truly understand just how scary it is to see a man getting mauled to bits by a bear. And truly, it's been bothering my sleep, and that's about it for my story. What you're about to read is a warning. I beg you, I implore you, please do not go hiking in the woods around Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I know those woods like the back of my hand. I played with my little brother among those trees when I was still in single-digit ages. So trust me when I say that something has been changing out there, and not for the better. I first noticed that something was horribly wrong during a hike a few weeks back. In early spring, birds migrate back from the warmer southern climates to their northern territories en masse. Thousands upon thousands of tiny songbirds occupy the trees around Mount Greylock during the month of March, each singing a sweet, chirpy song that is, in reality, a bellowed war cry, a call for challengers to step up and knock them off their perch. Yet, as I walked through the previous winter's leaf litter, I didn't hear a thing. No birds or any other animals, for that matter. This made me nervous for 2 reasons. One, animals have an uncanny ability to detect dangers that are imperceptible to humans. Their sense of smell, hearing, and general atmospherics are far superior to our own. And two, because areas of woodland turn exceptionally quiet when there is a large predator around. Wood pigeons will become deathly quiet and still, hoping that a black bear or a mountain lion will just pass them by. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But either way, it would be hideously unsafe of me to wander around while one was prowling the area. So naturally, I started making my way back towards my car when something really peculiar happened. I feel like I should remind you at this point that I had been playing in the woods around Mount Praylock since I was like 7 or 8. It's pretty far from where our family lived when I was a kid, but thanks to our bikes, we had a pretty large area to roam when it came to those long summer breaks. Point being, I know those woods really well, but some way, somehow, I managed to get lost. It first came to my attention that I had managed to get myself turned around when I felt my head begin to throb with a dull ache. I stopped walking for a moment, rubbing my eyes and the bridge of my nose to try and massage away the ache. But when I opened my eyes again and I looked around, I felt a faint flash of panic running through me. I did not recognize my surroundings, and I cannot understate how jarring that was for me because I had visited this place all of my life. But now it felt utterly foreign to me. I actually had to take out my compass just to try and get a bearing of where I was. To my surprise, the compass needle kept slowly moving around, even when I got it to sit still on a supposed bearing. It would begin to creep around again. This was actually less of a problem than it might appear. Yes, it was unnerving, but there are ways around a faulty compass. Like for one, moss mostly grows on the north side of a tree, the tree that gets the most sunlight. So that provided an easy way of determining which way was north. At least, it usually would. Because, as I suspected various tree trunks, I realized the sun was hanging in the southern portion of the sky. That or the moss in this area grew mostly on the south section of the tree trunks. I get that it's not entirely out of the question, but was yet another detail that just seemed to fry my brain. Nothing made sense, and the less it did, the more the feeling of pure panic began to bubble up in my chest. But to panic in that situation, or in any situation, is to welcome defeat, degradation, and death. So I kept myself calm, and I told myself that there had to be a rational explanation for everything that was occurring. And then I walked off in the direction that I was almost sure the nearest highway was. It was then that I came across something that I had never ever seen in those woods before. And it seemed that it was so out of place that it was frankly terrifying. In all of the years that I'd spent roaming those woods with my brother as a kid, I had never seen anything like the old rundown cabin that stood before me. There was no way that we could have missed this place. So, in my mind, the obvious thing to do was to knock on the cabin door to see if anyone was home, and as much as I might find it humiliating, ask for directions. But as I walked closer and closer towards the rustic front door, I began to feel an unusual sensation. I put it down to me being tired, or maybe my blood sugar was low. I'm not entirely sure, but for whatever reason, each footstep that took me closer to the cabin seemed more and more difficult. By the time I was actually bringing a closed fist up to knock on that old wooden door, it felt like something was physically repelling me from it, whispering directly into my brain to leave this place and never return. Don't look back. Never look back. When I finally knocked, the door creaked open slowly, revealing the dilapidation behind it. Whatever bolts or locks that were on the door had long since worn away, and the inside was just as run down and rotten as the outside was. It was evidently abandoned, but there was a curious order to the furniture that led me to believe that every so often the cabin did actually receive some visitors, aside from me. Suddenly, something in the corner of the cabin drew my attention, and what I'm about to describe is quite frankly indescribable. I know it was a wooden idol of some kind, a small statuette set atop of a stone altar. And I appreciate the fact that this is intensely confusing to read, but I could not make sense of what I was looking at. It was like my brain was completely incapable of computing the information that my eyes were feeding it. And that with my headache returned again, along with a kind of anxiety that was so crushing that I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. Don't ask me how I know, but that wooden idol, a mess of twigs, vines, and moss, was a representation of pure, unfiltered evil. So I ran. I'm not the least bit ashamed to admit that I ran like a scared child from that cabin and into the night. Yes, the night. When I walked into that cabin, it was daylight. I couldn't have been in there for more than a couple minutes. But when I burst through that wooden door, it was pitch black outside. I ran until I found my car, and then I drove like a madman until I was safely at home. I haven't been able to bring myself to talk about what happened that day until now. I tried to tell a hunting buddy of mine once, but the words just wouldn't come out. But please, if you're reading this, heed my warning and do not go hiking in the woods around Pittsfield, Massachusetts.